hadn't donated your entire $7 million settlement to charity at that point, had you?
That's incorrect.
Sitting here today, Ms. Heard, you still haven't donated the $7 million divorce settlement to charity. Isn't that right?
Incorrect. I pledged the entirety of the
Ms.
settlement,
Heard,
$7 million to charity, and I intend to fulfill those obligations.
Ms. Heard, that's not my question.
Hola Dermalover, ¿cómo estás? Para el video del día de hoy te traigo este resumen, actualización de lo que sucedió el día de hoy, lunes 16 de mayo, en el juicio de Amber Heard versus Johnny Depp. Pues llegó el día que todos estábamos esperando porque las cosas el día de hoy se prendieron y la verdad es que aplauso de pie para la abogada de Johnny Depp, Camille Vázquez, porque hizo un trabajo exquisito, magistral, que de verdad que todo el mundo aplaudiendo. Pues resulta que el día de hoy en el estrado siguió el testimonio de Amber Heard y en la primera parte pues siguió hablando de todo lo sucedido. Sin embargo, para la segunda parte o la parte final del día, fue cuando la abogada de Johnny Depp le empezó a hacer las preguntas y pues la dejó en evidencia. ¿Qué digo en evidencia? La expuso así rotundamente y hasta le dijo varias veces de eso no fue lo que yo te pregunté. Pero aquí les dejo el resumen y algunos clips de lo que sucedió. Inicia el día donde ella sigue dando su testimonio y dice que para ella la violencia era casi normal, que el cerebro hace con el trauma lo que hace, lo aparta lo mejor que puede y que francamente le sorprendió ver mucha de la información que se le presentó en las notas de la terapeuta, que estaba constantemente haciendo malabarismos con el tipo de versión de Johnny con la que estaba tratando. A veces ni siquiera recordaba lo que hacía o decía la otra versión, hablando de Johnny y el monstruo. Ella corrige su testimonio anterior, que esto fue súper relevante, ya que dice que la primera discusión sobre el tatuaje de Win of Forever ocurrió en el 2012 y no en el 2013. Y aquí es una súper contradicción porque sí, todo este tema pues te generó un trauma y es algo que viviste, pues claro que te vas a acordar perfectamente cuándo fue la primera vez que presuntamente tu pareja te golpeó, ¿no? Y el errar el año pues debe estar muy pero muy complicado.
Amber, when did the first act of physical violence by Mr. Depp occur?
Objection asked and answered.
No, overruled. Go ahead.
That would have been early 2012.
And how did you determine this?
I reviewed my therapist's
Objection,
notes.
hearsay.
She hasn't even answered it, Your
All
Honor.
right, I'll allow the answer.
By reviewing my therapist's notes.
Objection,
All right,
hearsay.
I'll sustain the objection.
Your Honor, but it's not offered to prove the truth of the matter asserted. It's explaining what she looked at.
I'll sustain the objection.
Okay. When did you earlier believe the first act of physical violence occurred?
Well, I had always believed up until recently that it had started later, that the violence started around early 2013, not early 2012.
Now, you testified earlier that the first act of physical violence by Mr. Depp related to the Winona Wino tattoo. Do you recall that testimony?
I do.
Okay. Does that change your testimony, realizing that this is earlier? Was this, in fact, still the first act?
Objection, leading.
Sustained.
What was the first act?
Objection asked and answered.
Sustained.
How do you remember the first act of violence?
Well, you never forget it. That's how I remember it. It changes your life forever. You never forget the first time someone hits you like that. I just had the date wrong.
Okay. And how is it that you think you got the date wrong?
Objection calls for speculation.
Overruled.
I'm embarrassed to say I think I would have liked to have believed that the period of time in which I had to fall in love with Johnny, in which we fell in love, and he was sober, and he wasn't violent to me, lasted for a lot longer than it did. I think I would have liked to have believed that I wasn't hit so early in the relationship and still stayed. He was also sober for a period in 2012, which was a peaceful time for us, in which we fell in love. So I had kind of allowed myself, I guess, to forget that the beginning of that period, 2012, before he got sober, was really violent and chaotic as well. I'm embarrassed to say that.
Now, you testified that the police were called multiple times. Other than the May 21, 2016, what other occasions were there where the police were called?
They were called in December of 2011. They were called in 2012. They were called in 2013 in March by the landlord. I had sought advice from Laurel Anderson as to whether I should call the police following
Objection,
the December.
hearsay.
Sustain.
Okay. When you filed the domestic violence temporary restraining order, how many acts of abuse did you allege at that time?
I gave the last couple, I believe, last two incidents, maybe three.
And why didn't you tell of all the acts of abuse at that time?
I was following advice from my counsel.
Okay. How many instances of abuse were included in the UK trial?
There were 14 acts of physical abuse and violence and 3 acts of sexual abuse.
And why were those 17 included in the UK trial?
Well, I was not a party, a direct party. I was a witness, so it was whatever their counsel, the Sun counsel, chose.
Okay. When is the first time you were called upon to provide a detailed accounting of as many times as you could recall of physical and sexual abuse by Mr. Depp?
Objection, hearsay.
That's not hearsay, Your Honor. I'm asking her when she was called upon to do so.
Well, the objection is hearsay.
Right, but it's not offered to prove the truth of the matter asserted, and it's just asking for date.
All right, overruled.
Thank you.
A few months ago, February in 2022, this year, was the first time I was asked to do so, other than cold in a deposition.
Okay. And when you were asked to provide those, what did you do to be able to prepare that accounting, that full accounting?
Well, I had the benefit of my therapist. note.
Objection, hearsay.
So, Your Honor, she's not saying what the therapist said. I'm just asking.
I'll overrule the objection.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I looked at my therapist notes. I had the benefit of those notes, which we had received in February, as well as I reviewed calendars, photos, text messages, my journals, my diaries, of which there were many. I put all of those together. It took a lot of time to be able to, adequately refresh my recollection and fill in the details over the course of the 5 years we were together.
And what did you do when you put that all together?
I kind of filled in and collected all of these various pieces of information and gave a fuller account as best I could for each incidents of violence that I had record of. I think it was called an interrogatory.
In this case?
In this case,
All right.
excuse
Did
me.
you sign that under oath?
I did.
Okay. And it was provided to counsel for Mr. Depp?
It was.
Okay. And was it a pretty lengthy document?
It was far too long.
And how is it that you didn't just remember all of those events like this?
That's not how your memory or my memory works. We were together for 5 years, almost 4.5, and it was a very violent, chaotic, at times very loving, emotional relationship. So as anyone can imagine, there was a lot going on, and unfortunately the violence became almost normal, especially towards the end. It was just, it's hard to say that now, but the violence was almost normal. And, you know, your brain does with trauma what it does, puts it away best you can. So frankly, I was shocked to see a lot of the information presented to me through my therapist's notes, because she was taking them in real time.
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay.
All right, I'll sustain that objection.
Okay, we'll move past what the therapist said in her notes. Okay. Now, there's one more. You also provided a declaration in this case early on. Do you recall that, trying to move the case to California?
Yes, there was a declaration in 2019.
All right, and did you describe some of the events of violence in that declaration?
Objection leading.
What, if anything, was said about violent acts in that declaration?
I was taking the advice of my counsel. It was to get it moved, I believe.
Okay, and was there, did you include all of them?
No.
Objection leading.
Overruled.
Thank you.
No, I did not include all of the incidents of violence. That was not the point of making this declaration. We were making this declaration in an effort to move it to California, because as hard as it is to go through this sort of trial as it is, it's even harder to do so in a place that neither Johnny nor I are connected to.
Okay. Now, you testified earlier about guitars, and you said you've never played a guitar.
Quien declara que revisó los diarios, mensajes de texto, calendarios y notas del terapeuta para determinar la línea del tiempo de su relación con Johnny y los supuestos abusos. Y aquí también cabe aclarar que pues al final de cuentas tuvo una semana de break, bueno, todos lo tuvimos, y pudieron haber revisado pues toda la situación o todo lo que ha estado pasando pues en redes sociales. También habla de una declaración del 2019 para trasladar el juicio por difamación a California, ya que por muy difícil que sea de superar esa prueba, es más difícil que esto haya sido en un lugar donde ellos no se sientan conectados. También testifica que la palabra sofá actuó como palabra de seguridad en sus peleas con Johnny. Era una palabra como tregua en la que se bajaban las armas y decían no vamos a luchar más. Después se muestran fotos con cicatrices en uno de sus brazos donde ella dice que son cortes del incidente de marzo del 2015 en Australia, cuando Johnny la metió en el bar y la estaba ahorcando y ella se cortó los brazos con el cristal. Cuando están hablando del trabajo en la película London Fields, dice que Johnny se puso furioso, la abofeteó en la cara y más tarde le dio un puñetazo en la mandíbula cuando vio a una doble de cuerpo de ella participar en una escena de sexo en la película. Dice que Johnny Depp tenía una regla por la que se prohibía filmar escenas de sexo y que se enfadó con ella por esa escena de sexo con James Franco, para la que utilizaron una doble. Ella testifica que encontró una carpeta en la computadora de Johnny con la etiqueta No Fun for Johnny Depp, que incluía fotos de ella en la alfombra roja con ropa reveladora. Reproduce uno de los audios donde ella dice que sí lo había golpeado y dice textual: estoy hablando de la diferencia entre un puñetazo que Johnny daba a menudo y que yo tenga que pegarle en mi defensa. O sea, siempre se está justificando que lo golpeaba, pero solo y simplemente en su defensa. Otra de las cosas interesantes que sucedió el día de hoy fue que habló acerca del paquete o el regalito en la cama cuando ellos se despidieron por última vez y ella se fue a Coachella, y dice que no, que en realidad no fue ella, que fueron sus perritos porque estaban mal del estómago. Aquí les dejo el clip.
And so we eventually got out of my bed and grabbed a few things and got the dogs, left for our plans, which our plans had been to go to Coachella, which is a music festival that happens in California. And that had been the plan for a while, that's how we would go and celebrate my birthday. And I remember, as I am accustomed to doing, just trying to move through it, move on, and remember in vain trying to put on a brave face and have a good time, even though it was impossible.
Let me stop you for a few things. What, if any, plans were there for Mr. Depp to join you at Coachella?
He was supposed to drive down, have dinner, stay in the room, maybe do some writing or something like that in the room.
At Coachella?
At Coachella, where we were. Coachella happens in a different part of California than we lived in. We lived in Los Angeles, and this happens about 2 to 3 hours away. So I finally got in my car back, and I drove with my best friends in the car.
And I'm going to stop you again because I just have a couple more questions before we go into that part. You said you brought the dogs. Who were the dogs you brought?
Johnny's dog, at the time, Boo. My dog, Pistol. We shared them. They're teacup Yorkies, and I believe Raquel, my best friend's dog, which is a mutt.
Okay. What, if any, issues did Boo have with bathroom problems, if you will?
Objection, leading and relevance.
Overruled, I'll allow it.
She had eaten Johnny's weed when she was a puppy and had bowel control issues for her entire life, among some other issues. She was, we regularly had to take her to the vet to try to figure out, well, what was wrong with this dog. Never met a dog that was quite like this. So she had some control issues, hence why she liked to burrow in the bed. She liked to be in the, by the foot of the bed underneath the covers. And it was customary that they slept in bed with us, but Boo, having the issues she had, we have to leave her in bed so that she wouldn't be encouraged to go to the bathroom, which would happen almost immediately once you put her down on the floor. And sometimes it happened in bed too. But yeah.
So what, if anything, did you notice about any bathroom issues in your bed before you left for Coachella?
Well, Raquel and I were both in that bed with the dogs, and I didn't notice anything, but we left them in the bed while we packed a bag to go to Coachella, so that Boo particularly didn't lose control of her didn't go to the bathroom on the floor. So we leave them in bed until you're ready to take them outside to the patio, which is their designated bathroom break area.
Okay. And what, if any, plans were there? How often did you have housekeeping at that time at your house?
The housekeepers were there every morning.
Okay.
Or they came every day, as far as I know.
Okay. Now, we'll get you to Coachella, but why did you tell Starling Jenkins that you had been involved in a prank gone wrong?
Objection, hearsay, leading.
I said why, Your Honor. I didn't say what she said.
I'll sustain the objection. Next question.
Okay. Did you commit any kind of prank?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
Absolutely not.
And why would that not be something you would do?
First of all, I don't think that's funny. I don't know what a grown woman does. I was not also in a pranking mood. My life was falling apart. I was at a crossroads in my life that was really serious, and I had just been on my 30th birthday by my husband, with whom I was desperately in love and knew I needed to leave. It was not really a jovial time, and I don't think that's funny, period. That's disgusting.
And what, if any, understanding did you have of Mr. Depp coming back to your bedroom that night or the next morning?
Objection calls for speculation.
I'm asking what her understanding was.
No, I'll sustain the objection.
Okay. Had you had any conversations with Mr. Depp about him coming back to the house the next day?
No, Johnny didn't come back to that house. That was my, he owned it, but that was my house when we were having any sort of problem. In fact, that was my house just 90% of the time, because he just didn't come back. That was not a place that Johnny was going to be in, that Johnny was in, and he had stormed out on my birthday, and as per what we did, he would go and stay at his West Hollywood home, and I would stay at the downtown places. He wasn't going to come back to the
Objection calls for speculation.
I think she explained her answer on that
Okay,
one, what she
I'll sustain
thought.
just the last part. Okay,
Okay,
next question.
thank you. All right, so let's take you to Coachella. Who drove?
I drove.
Okay, and who was in your vehicle?
My sister, my friend Savannah, I believe, my best friend Raquel, just my girlfriends. I typically surround myself with my girlfriends. It's my sport.
Was there any occasion in which you were riding in the vehicle that Starling Jenkins was driving?
He picked us up from Coachella in the evening when we, as a group, all were ready to leave. That was the day that we went, which was the day that I took MDMA and mushrooms at the same time. So realized very shortly after what a horrible idea that was, considering the state that my life was in. I highly don't recommend that combination at the time. So I didn't feel like being in a crowd. I didn't feel like being at Coachella. I had intended to try to have a good time despite what was going on in my personal life. And I realized that that was just not going to happen. And so I wanted to go home. Meaning to be in a bed. I wanted to be, I just wanted to be held by my best friend and watch a movie. And that's what we did. I didn't feel well and wanted to leave.
Okay, and when you said you rode back with Starling Jenkins, was it just you, or did you have other people in the vehicle with you?
When we left Coachella, it was my entire group. I wasn't ever alone with Starling. I certainly wasn't anywhere near him. I didn't have a conversation with him. I sat in the very back seat with my best friend next to me, and it was a whole group of us.
Thank you. Your Honor, I don't know, this might be a good breaking point.
All right, that's fine. Okay, ladies, let's go ahead and take our morning recess. Do not discuss the case with anybody and don't do any outside research. We'll take 15 minutes, okay?
Y bueno, otra de las cosas que sucedió, que fue lo más interesante del juicio del día de hoy, fue la contrainterrogación de la abogada de Johnny Depp, donde se habló acerca de las donaciones, que de verdad esto estuvo bien intenso, y también se habló de los presuntos golpes, donde Camille le sacó toda la evidencia diciéndole de aquí estabas en la alfombra roja y tú acabas de decir que él te dio un puñetazo cuando él siempre tiene anillos, todo el mundo lo sabe, y pues ahora me estás diciendo que en la alfombra roja no te pasó nada, ¿no? Y ella dice que se lo tapó con maquillaje y la desinflamación fue con hielo. Y Camille era de verdad, en esta foto también sucedió esto, y ella sí, pero con una actitud soberbia, altanera, y eso es lo más creepy de todo esto, porque minutos antes, horas antes, estaba en su papel de víctima, donde no podía llorar, donde todo estaba mal y era una mujer golpeada, y cuando Camille la enfrentó, o bueno, le hizo el contrainterrogatorio, ahí fue altanera, soberbia, y le decía cosas como yo lo dije, y porque yo lo dije, así es, ¿no? Aquí les dejo los clips.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Depp hasn't looked at you once this entire trial, has he?
Not that I've noticed, no.
You've looked at him, though, many times, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
You know exactly why Mr. Depp won't look back at you, don't you?
I do.
He promised you you would never see his eyes again. Isn't that true?
I don't recall if he said that.
One of the last times you ever saw Mr. Depp was when you met him in San Francisco in July of 2016, right?
That was the second to last time I saw him, yes.
And this was after you had publicly accused him of domestic violence.
I got my restraining order before that, yes. Mm-hmm.
And this is after you had obtained the domestic violence restraining order against him.
That's correct.
Let's please play Plaintiff's Exhibit 1229.
Oh no, a hug will save it all. All this, everything we just
I
been
just wanted to touch you.
through. Really? After all this shit you just said?
I just wanted to give
After
you a
all this
hug.
shit you fucking accused me of, you
yes,
wanted to
please,
touch me?
please stop me.
Fucking,
Please stop.
fucking nuts.
Please, I just wanted to hug you. Please say bye. I didn't want to take it back.
We did that last night. It's fine. That was good enough. No, because I'm nothing to you, and I will always be nothing to you.
Calm.
Well, you're not my shrink. No. No, you're in fucking hole. No, we'll never see each other again. You won't even don't take my fucking glasses off. You don't like fucking looking at not my fucking eyes? You will not see my eyes again.
That's you and Mr. Depp in that recording.
That is.
And this is from when you and Mr. Depp met in San Francisco in July of 2016, right?
Yes, that's what it sounds like. That was in the hotel. We met once after that as well.
This is after you publicly accused him of domestic abuse.
Yes, and got my TRO.
And he tells you you will not see my eyes again, doesn't he?
Yes, he does in that recording.
And he kept that promise, hasn't he?
As far as I know, he cannot look at me.
He won't look at you, right, Miss Heard?
He can't.
The first questions your counsel asked you on direct is, why are you here? Do you remember that?
I do.
Right, and see what the jury and judge think. Tell the world, Johnny. Tell them, Johnny Depp. Johnny Depp, man, I'm a victim too of domestic violence, and
Yes.
it's a fair fight. And see how many people believe or side with you.
That's your voice on that recording, right?
Yes, it is.
And you were speaking with Mr. Depp?
Yes.
And you said to Mr. Depp, quote, you can please tell people that it was a fair fight and see what the jury and the judge think. Tell the world, Johnny. Tell them, Johnny Depp, Johnny Depp, a man, a victim too of domestic violence, end quote. That's what you said, right?
I was saying it to the man who beat me up, yes. I thought it was preposterous.
And the man you beat up numerous times. Right, Miss Heard?
I could never hurt Johnny.
You're here in this courtroom because Mr. Depp finally told the world that he is a victim of domestic violence.
I know that he is suing me and has sued other people or corporations that have said that as well.
You didn't think he would tell the world he was a victim of domestic violence, did you?
I found it hard to believe that he could or that he would do that, considering the relationship he and I had. I thought it would be crazy for him to do so, knowing what I know we lived through.
Or, as you said to him in that recording, who was going to believe that Johnny Depp, a man, is a victim of domestic violence, right?
With all due respect, I wasn't saying it because he's a man. I was saying it because he was a man who beat me up for 5 years.
Mr. Depp is your victim, isn't he?
No, ma'am.
And once he left you, you continued to abuse him publicly by calling him an abuser, didn't you?
He is an abuser, and you can look either of us up online and figure out who's being abused online.
Let's look at some of that. Mr. Depp wears rings on every finger, doesn't he, Miss Heard?
That's my experience, yes.
And they're not delicate rings, are they?
No, they are not.
Every one of his fingers is adorned, your words, big, chunky rings. Isn't that right?
That's my experience of him.
And Mr. Depp is always wearing rings, right, Miss Heard?
That's my experience of him.
And you've never known him not to wear these rings.
That's my experience, is he normally wore rings, yes.
So Mr. Depp was wearing these big, chunky rings on every finger, every incident of abuse you've described to this jury, right?
I can't say for certain it was in every single incident.
But you've never known him not to wear rings, right?
In general, my experience with Johnny is that he wears rings almost all the time.
Ms. Heard, you testified to an incident in March of 2013 where Mr. Depp hit you in the face multiple times. Do you recall that?
That's correct.
And you testified, quote, you don't know how many times he hit you in the face.
That's correct.
So Mr. Depp hit you in the face multiple times while he was wearing rings on this occasion, correct?
Which occasion in March are you referencing? You weren't
The
specific.
testimony that you gave on day 15 of this trial, March of 2013. You weren't specific as to the day.
There were several incidents.
The one where he hit you several times in the face.
I'm sorry, just so I understand better, there were several incidents in March. Which one are you asking me about?
The time that he hit you several times in the face wearing rings.
Well, he pretty
In
much
March of
always...
2013.
Right. What are you asking me? I'm sorry.
He was wearing rings on that occasion?
I pretty much always knew him to wear rings.
Okay, let's please pull up Defendant's Exhibit 170A, which is already in evidence, Your Honor. You testified that this is a picture you took after that incident, right, Ms. Heard?
Yes, that was one where he grabbed me.
And hit you in the face so many times that you don't remember. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
And there's no injuries to your face in this picture, are there?
Not that this picture shows.
And there's no medical records reflecting that you sought treatment after this alleged incident either.
I did not seek medical treatment at this time.
So there's no medical records reflecting any injuries to your face after he hit you several times,
I did not need to go to the doctor at the time.
despite hitting you several times that you lost count with rings on on his fingers.
That's correct. I did not seek medical attention.
Right?
That's correct. I made that statement as soon as I got a divorce and we reached the settlement. That's when I pledged it, right then.
And you say this because you, quote, wanted nothing, end quote.
That is correct.
But you hadn't donated your entire $7 million settlement to charity at that point, had you?
That's incorrect.
Sitting here today, Ms. Heard, you still haven't donated the $7 million divorce settlement to charity. Isn't that right?
Incorrect. I pledged the entirety of the
Ms. Heard,
settlement,
that's
$7
not
million
my
to
question.
charity, and I
Ms. Heard,
intend to
Ms.
fulfill
Heard,
those obligations.
Ms. Heard, that's not my question. Please,
What was
try
your
to answer
question?
my question. Sitting here today, you have not donated the $7 million, donated, not pledged, donated the $7 million divorce settlement to charity.
I use pledge and donation synonymous with one another. They
But
do
I
the same
don't.
thing.
Ms. Heard, I don't use it synonymously.
That's how donations are paid.
Ms. Heard, respectfully, that's not my question. As of today, you have not paid $3.5 million of your own money to the ACLU. Yes or no?
I have not yet.
And as of today, you have not paid $3.5 million of your own money to the Children's Hospital of Los Angeles, correct?
I have not yet. Johnny sued me.
So as of today, you have not donated, paid $7 million of your divorce settlement to charity, right?
I have not been able to fulfill those obligations yet.
And that's because you did want something, didn't you?
I didn't want anything and I didn't get anything.
You wanted Mr.
Y bueno, pues esto es lo que sucedió el día de hoy, lunes 16 de mayo, en este juicio, y la verdad es que esto se prendió. Bueno, pues esto fue todo por este video, espero que les haya gustado muchísimo y recuerden que si quieren pertenecer a esta familia de Drama Lovers, por favor suscríbanse a este canal porque hay videos diarios con mucho, pero mucho más drama.